Hello, humans. I'm Luke Rain, welcoming you to episode 48 of the Human Music Podcast, Being a Producer in Quarantine. Happy Quarantine-aversary, y'all. We went live on Dojo TV to reflect on the 1 year of quarantine we've all been living in and what it's been like for music producers. Where was it harder? Did anything get easier? What lessons have we learned? We cover using time wisely, bad and good habits we picked up, scheduling, to-do lists, and leveling up to mastery. Before we get into the episode, I just want to tell you about our sponsors really quick. First, Dojo TV, where we recorded this. You can get in on these free producer live stream classes from the Producer Dojo Senseis and Ill Gates himself, or upgrade to the Dojo Max membership, where you can get monthly private lessons, unlimited track feedback, and the weekly download archive from Ill Gates. It's the best value the Producer Dojo has to offer. Guest practices, where you can learn from Seth Drake of the Approach Institute. He is the best engineer we know. We've learned so much about mixing and mastering and just how to hear sound from Seth Drake. And finally, Gvngaroo Records from Bounce Gang, where you can get unlimited uploads for under $10 without some of that nickel and diamond that a lot of these other companies like to do. Again, links in the description, all products that I use, know, love, and am highly, highly endorsing. So let's get into this episode. Peace, humans.
Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesco with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it. What's up, ninjas? What's up, humans? It is the Human Music Podcast live on Dojo TV.
It is that. It is that. Hello,
What's
friends.
good?
With me are these two handsome gentlemen, Tesco.
Hey, what's up?
And of course, Rip Kenny.
Speak for yourself, Mr. Handsome Man. Hello, friends.
Yeah, for real.
Hey, if somebody put in the chat that they're pretty and they're loved, because I can see the
Don't
low
do that.
self-esteem
Don't
here.
do that. Don't do that. I love
Tell
all
Rip
of you.
He's pretty.
You can tell Luke he's pretty. Look at that fucking hair.
Oh, he knows.
Oh my God.
Luscious locks.
Jesus.
Hey, what's up, Zach?
That
What's up, buddy?
voice.
Big up, chat. I stole
Big
your
up, chat.
Yo, does
What's
anybody
up?
know how to make emojis? We should get a big up emoji.
We do need a
But
big
anyway.
up emoji.
Oh, dude, that Run the Jewels, Rick and Morty picture, Goosetronics, fucking all
That's
the wins
solid.
for that shit.
That's super
lit.
solid.
Yo, though, so what we're getting into today is something we are all very familiar with. What has it been like to be a music producer during quarantine? We've got a year of being stuck in the house under our belts. So I'm sure we got a lot to talk about, how the world's changed, how our outlook has changed, what we've been focused on compared to what we were focused on in the years before. And we definitely want to hear from the chat. We want to get this chat into it over at Dojo TV. If anybody is not in this chat and listening to this in the future times, well, what's wrong with you? Dojo TV is free. Come hang out with us, for Christ's sake. There will be a link right there below. So just go click it and sign up for Dojo TV. It's a lot of fun. Join all the ninjas. But yeah, so a year of quarantine. Who would have thought it would have been this long? I mean, like smart people and scientists probably, but the rest of us were like, yeah, you're like 6 months. We'll probably knock this thing out.
Man, longest 2-week vacation ever.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah, man.
It's only been like 2 weeks, right? Or wait, you just said a year? A year-long reflection?
Happy COVID-versary.
Literally 1 year ago today was the last time I was on an airplane, which used to be like twice a month minimum for me. I was
Look
jet
at you.
set.
Look at
Damn,
you.
Yeah, you gotta fly
That's
there.
a lot of jet set.
You got-
yeah, okay.
What are you, like PJ Life or whatever? You 2 times a month?
Yeah, you know,
Damn, bro.
I would go home.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying then.
2 airplane rides a month,
One
down to 0 in a
round
whole
trip,
year.
one round trip ticket per month. That's actually
Mhm.
that's still good, man. That's traveling. That's
Oh,
going
I really
places.
liked it.
I believe it. You're a people person, and I respect that about you. You're good at it.
Amen.
For
I
me,
like how you put that, though, by the way. I visited 4 airports this month. Sounds
um,
way more impressive. Sorry, Evan.
I was just gonna say, like, the time shift of COVID, where like feels like it's gone by really, like you feel like it's been a long time, but it's also gone by really fast. I was actually just talking with someone the other day about this, where it's like, there's this like psychological principle. I think we talked about it on the podcast maybe once or twice before, but there's a psychological principle that governs your memory of time, and it's based on the variation of your life, right? So your 4 week vacation to Hawaii, where you sat on the beach every day and then went and got some Mai Tais at the hotel bar next to the swimming pool, and then went to one of 2 or 3 restaurants and then went to bed and sleep, repeat. Feels like it went by like that. But the 10 days you went to Europe and you spent 3 days in Berlin going to 3 different clubs, and then you went to London, and then you went to Spain for another 4 days in London, 3 days in Spain, whatever. A very, yeah, I mean, whatever it is, say you spent 2 or 3 days, yeah, say you spent 2 or 3 days in 3 different places for 10 days. Um, it's going to feel longer than that vacation in Hawaii where you did the same thing every day. If you're switching up your routine and what you're seeing, it feel like you remember it being longer, which is interesting. But all of that to say that COVID, you remember it being very quick because you pretty much are doing the same thing every day. Hopefully, you're changing your sweatpants. Maybe you put your nice sweatpants on today. You, you know those nice sweatpants. Maybe they're just a little less baggy than the other ones. Maybe maybe you pay
Yeah, I was
twenty
going to
five
say.
dollars instead of 15. Your nice sweat. You know the ones I'm talking about. But that's pretty much the variation in your day, right? It's like I put on my nice sweatpants or my shoes. Like that's not a whole lot of variation. So it makes it tough to produce when there's not that much variation, because a diversity of creative output requires a diversity of input, right? So this is the first big thing that I wanted to talk about today, which is COVID has taught us that more time to produce doesn't necessarily mean more great songs, right? Like I think a lot of us have suffered from days where we're like, man, I just don't have it today. Like I just don't have it. And maybe that's day 4 sitting in front of a computer thinking that like the more I bang on the keyboard, like the better the music is going to be. It's not necessarily true. Like the best melody ideas or the best lyric ideas or anything that pop into my head are normally when I'm out doing something. Like the song 2020 that I released in December, like that whole vocal idea, like I was literally just singing into my phone while I was taking a walk in the woods behind my house because I needed to get up from my computer. Um, because I was suffering from that exact thing. Like, oh my God, I've been staring at the computer for so long. Like I'm not feeling inspired. I got to get up and do something. And then it came back, right? So have you guys experienced that? Do you agree with me?
100%. Especially for lyrical stuff. It can get really stale on what you're talking about. Yeah, man. I think it I can't speak from the people that haven't worked at all since this started, because I can imagine that would be a lot different. I mean, working definitely felt like a wormhole of time as well, like just working from home and trying to like mentally switch from work time to home time. Like I feel it's kind of hard when your like environment all around you is the exact same and you just like close one laptop and like look at another. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I definitely feel you on that. It kind of depends too, though. because I won't say I didn't make, stuff that I'm happy with. But yeah, I definitely feel you. There's some sessions for sure where you're just like kind of bashing your head off a wall and you're like, it works, but it's not like there's nothing compelling about it type deal. So
yeah, there's like more hours spent producing, but the percentage of output that you would consider great or A level quality is like on a percentage basis is just slightly lower, or maybe a lot lower, or just marginally lower, or average lower, but it's lower.
I feel like I can still get good ideas out if I get it going. Personally, I just feel like coming up and committing to an idea to write about and to work on, I feel more uncertainty in the picking of the idea because I'm not like particularly inspired to go towards one direction. Because when you just come back from a show and you're just like, oh, whatever the fuck that second person played like half an hour in, whatever that sound is, and you're just going off of like the vibe of hearing that in the moment and kind of what you remember from it. And I'm sure you guys can relate to in the moment, like when you're nerdy, like producer brain starts going off. You're like, oh my God, they did this thing. Like, I'm going to tweak these synths when I get home. I'm going to try this thing. Like, oh, I could do something like that. Like all these like hyped up ideas that come with a lot of emotion that are like tied to what you just experienced manifest differently than if you like listen to a set online, even if they have a sick virtual experience or whatever. It's just not quite the same,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know that my quality has gone down objectively. I think I've found new aspects to my sound and developed them further and all of that. But as far as the emotional expressive aspect goes, I feel definitely there's more sessions where I'm like, I'm just writing to write and I don't know what I want to say with this track.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm like halfway there.
Yeah. Actually, one thing that you touched on was one of the solutions that I wanted to offer to the people, to the chat. Big up, chat! Is what I've found is that exactly like you said, there's more, it's tougher to pick the good idea, like, because you feel like you're just in a wash of like average ideas sometimes. And so what I've found is that like, there's always like periods in your day. Maybe it's like 9 at night or first thing in the morning or after, right after you get off work or whatever. But there's always like a period of time where you feel like that creative passion, and maybe it's fleeting too sometimes. Maybe it's only like 15 minutes. But if when that hits and you're like excited to try this idea that you were thinking about overnight or whatever, just sit down and spend 15 minutes like getting an idea into the computer. Because what I found is that like those pre-built ideas that you can then take your writing day and use those as your starting place and not have to sift through 20 ideas that are maybe good, maybe bad. And then just like, this is the idea. I know this is good, and run with it. Those are the ones that have ended up really good for me lately. And yeah, like I said, like it's easier to channel that when you're excited about it, right? Like follow the passion, because when you're like totally immersed in that idea and excited about it, like you're more likely to continue to make the moves that make it good after like the initial, like if you just click notes into the MIDI roll for this melody idea that's in your head, it's all going to be on the grid. It's not going to be the same velocity. It's on a patch. It's not doing anything different. Like it's going to sound okay. But if you're excited about this, you're excited about getting this idea in, you're going to like take the time to like tweak this little thing on this note and like, do all the little stuff that matters to make it into something great. And so I feel like for me, at least, taking and trying to capture that excitement whenever it happens during the day. Maybe you're like sitting on the couch with your girl watching Netflix and you have this idea, like pop open your laptop and throw an earbud in and like throw it in the computer, like see if it's good or not, and then just like close the laptop, put it away, and like I'm gonna work on that later. It just ends up, it's a good way to shortcut that like feeling of like sifting through a bunch of average ideas.
Amen. I like that. I'm curious to hear your side, Luke, but just to add on to that, some of the best shit I've written this year, now that you mention it, has come from those sessions where beforehand I set up a lot of shit for my future self, because I know when that, one line comes to sing or to like rhyme with or create a theme around or whatever, then I already have this whole like foundation of these chord progressions and stuff that are bounced out with sounds I already like, and I can just transpose them up or down and quickly start building like a skeleton around that, or like start adding, like I've been using your bass sounds a lot and just been like layering them with drums and using them as fills and stuff. Like, bro, super cool stuff. And it allows me to like get an idea really quickly within the first half an hour and know whether, it's gonna be fruitful or not. Like some of those ideas I knew within 20 minutes, and they ended up being stuff that's like, actively being worked on now and like got that much further developed. And I don't think I would have been able to do that all in one session. And I don't think, it would have turned out as good if I hadn't done 10, 15 melodies beforehand and like picked the best out of those. And there's definitely some I want to go back to and use. So it's not like the ratio of like good to bad is that skewed, but that's just, inevitably how it is. And if you apply that quality through quantity sort of motto to all of the smaller parts of the process too, I feel like it just results in the best shit.
Yeah, 100%.
But anyway, Luke, how you been, buddy?
Luke's the ideas guy. He's not even affected by it, aren't you?
I mean, I definitely have a different experience than y'all.
I knew it.
Well,
oh my god.
Oh man, like I am one of the people, maybe the few people, whose life got way more busy and also productive during the pandemic. I mean, for one thing, I wasn't breaking up my routine by spending a week of every month out of town doing networking events. That was a routine in and of itself, but just sidebar, like I remember literally like the last music related trip I took was NAMM last January. And I was at Dylan's house, at Ilgate's house, and I met, some of his friends, and we were talking and like, oh, wow, you travel like a week out of every month. That's really cool. But don't you find it hard to like stay in a routine and be productive? And I was like, no, not at all. And then COVID happened like a month and a half later. And all of a sudden I'm at the house every single day, and I stopped working and I added all these other things to my plate and had to get my schedule much tighter. I also stopped smoking weed, which didn't hurt. So it's like all of a sudden I've got that much more time, that much more brain power, and that many more things that I have deadlines to get done, like a podcast. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, I just got to get this done. And then after a couple of months, I had added all the stuff to my schedule and I went back to work. And, I didn't go back full time. Self-employed, so I had the benefit of choosing how many hours I wanted to work. And I decided that since I'm not traveling so much, I don't need as much money and I'm not going to go work as many hours, so I can still produce a podcast and shit. And so kind of my solution to the inspiration problem was work so much on music adjacent but non-creative tasks that when I do, like my brain eventually just like screams a good idea at me. And I have to just ignore all my other shit that I probably should be doing tonight and just actually write this song until 5 a.m. and just stay at the computer and be like, yeah, fuck it. I'll do that tomorrow, whatever. I'll email them and tell them I'm going to be late. I don't care. I just got to get this done. And like, so, I definitely have had some of my favorite songs I've ever written in the past year, and also taken some tracks that I had written, a little bit before that, and had no idea how to finish because I've done, did so much practice on my, like my mixing and my arrangement, doing more arrangement exercises, doing more preparation and like, getting better sounds, put together, having a better serum library, all those kinds of things. I could go back to these older ideas and be like, oh, wow, now I can run it through my mix template, see which sounds aren't working with my more trained ears, delete those and replace those melody lines with these better synth patches that, you know, some cool guys that I know made. What's up, buddies? You know, like I had a track I did with Shoes like 3 years ago that we really liked. It had a really cool idea. It had a cool, you know, melody. It had a cool lyric. But going back to it, it's like, oh, like the recording and the processing of the vocal sucks, but the line is good. The melody of the lead bass line is really good, but the patch sucks. Oh, just let me like replace this shit and replace that. And like now that's one of my favorite tracks. But that was kind of a tangent to get back to like, yeah, man, like inspiration hasn't really been that much of a problem to me just because I stuffed my life full with so many things that made me wish I was being creative instead, that all of a sudden an idea pops through and takes all of my attention for a whole night. And then I just drop it in feedback and once a week or so push it slightly forward with a bunch of other tracks, which are now I've got a pretty kicking batch of tracks. And I've started this once a month release schedule for 2021. First time I've ever done that. And then now that's the deadline I've set up. So now I have that much more motivation to keep pushing and finishing tracks because I don't want to break my agreement with myself.
Yeah. And that consistency is so key. I have to say that your non-lack of ideas is unfortunately not surprising to me at all. When we were doing that little tour and we were staying at Tyson Nintendo's place in Montana and we were producing, you're just always just ideas. I was like, this guy's a machine. Oh my God. But what I'm hearing from you is that like you're like having those ideas is a strength that you've learned to like harness by tightening up your schedule, by giving yourself a process and honing in on that process to be able to leverage that skill in a way that's beneficial to your musical output, right? And I think that we all have stuff that in our musical journey we find ourselves to be better at than others, right? Like I'm not an ideas all day guy. I like sound design. I can do that. I'll tinker with that all day. Like it's not hard for me to come up with like a good patch, just like it's not hard for you to come up with like a good idea, right? And so then like you figure out how to leverage that for yourself, like saving racks and patches, at least speaking for myself, in those nighttime sessions that you can then use to like filter your limited ideas through to sound good later, right? And for you, you're like ideas all day, but let me figure out my mix template and all this stuff to like make sure that those ideas are being filtered into songs that I can finish and release. So for all the peoples out there, figure out what you're good at, double down on that, and then hone in the process to leverage that into more music.
Amen. Very well
I was also
said.
going to say, on your point of deadlines,
Get closer to that mic, buddy.
Scoot up.
Thank you. I always find my best shit comes out when I have other obligations, and then I push them to the side and just, shove that anxiety to the back of your mind and deal with that in a couple hours because this one's going to be juicy.
Yeah. It's so funny. Like your amount of busy can fluctuate and you will find the time to get almost all of it done. If you're the type of person that like can push yourself in certain spots to get it done, like you're like work expands to fill the time allotted. Like when you hear that, you don't think it's true, but then it becomes true, like in like almost invariably. And I think that also is something that we've experienced in like having more time to produce. Like if you've got more time to sit in front of the computer and noodle, like you're going to noodle more, but maybe you're noodling a little bit more unfocused and you have all these other things floating around your head and you're not really 100% into that. And then that 4 hours that you thought you were going to, come up with 4 song ideas, maybe you just spent that whole time noodling with 3 different patches. Who knows? But yeah, it happens like that.
Yeah, I feel
Man,
you on that. That the work will expand to fill the time allotted. My dad was in traveling, touring rock bands, like cover bands in the '70s, and he
Sick.
told me like when he started with this new band, and they'd show up, they'd drive to a town and play like a 3 or 4 night run at a venue, and they would get done, they would pack out of a venue on Sunday and like drive overnight to the next spot, get there on Monday, but they wouldn't start playing till Thursday night. And he's like, yo, like why do we wait until Thursday afternoon to start setting up? Wouldn't it make more sense to like start on Monday or Tuesday so we have more time and it's not like a rush? And his band leader was like, oh no, if we start on Monday, it'll take us all week to set up. If we start on Thursday, on Thursday. I would rather have the first half of the week to chill out and see this town and sleep and shit. Like, not good.
Yeah, so accurate. That's a hilarious like example of that. It's so true.
I was gonna say too, with timers, that's been so huge as well for me, like coming back to it. I mean, I've come back to it, a couple times over the course of quarantine further, right? It's like one of those things you always come back to. And I feel being conscious of not noodling around and setting a strict timer on what you're supposed to do, like also ties into that idea, because you got to get drums down in 5 minutes, you need this in 5 minutes, so on. So that's a really nice creative limitation to just like train that decision making muscle that can pick an idea and roll with it and see it through. And I think it gives you a lot of context on what ideas you pick, right? And it like trains that sense as well. But man, if anybody's listening, they're not doing timers, like that's so huge. Definitely like encourage people to just, whether it's timers to actually finish songs, or you have a goal of I should learn sound design or I should learn a new effect, like just set a timer for whatever you feel is appropriate, pushing yourself slightly, of course. And like for 10 minutes a day, just like explore the manual and learn a new aspect of your DAW, or like sound design 2 basses. And if you could train yourself to do these small tasks on a time limit and you get the reps in, super huge.
Yeah. One of the things that you just mentioned, reading the manual to something when you're like trying to figure out, like, how do I level up on this thing? I heard a quote from some producer, some big name. I don't remember exactly who it was, but no, it wasn't me. Big up chat. Big up chat. Hey, by the way, okay, if anyone has experiences with quarantine that they want, to delve into, or questions that they have, like how are we dealing with specific portions of quarantine producer life, type them in the chat, and we'll get to them and make sure that we can, help you guys out as well, because this is just as much about you as it is us. But yeah, one of the things that you touched on that I wanted to talk about a little bit was basically like when you're producing and you feel like you want to level up, being able to get past that initial 20% of learning something by just like fiddling knobs, and you kind of know what they sound like, but you don't really know what they're doing. And you found a couple things that you like, but you haven't really explored the whole thing. Like, I would say probably 95% of people that have Serum are at that like 20 to 30% level with it. Like, and that's going to sound like an overstatement, but it's not. I really don't think it is. Like, they're like, knowing the tool inside and out can provide the biggest creative benefits to actually make the stuff that like is new or interesting. Like, you don't necessarily need the newest synth to come up with the most interesting sound. Like, knowing that one synth, like inside and out, not 20%, not 30%, not 50%, not 70%, like 95 to 100%. Like, what everything in that sense. You know, all the secret, you know how to type equations into the wavetable editor of Serum and get something that looks cool. How many of y'all are doing that? Probably not many, but like that to say, like, there's so many intricacies of these things that you already have that if you can spend the time to learn, you're going to be able to come up with that much more like in-depth like sound or process or chain that's going to actually yield much more interesting results to you than instead of having 5 or 6 tools that other people use and also know that 20 to 30% level, because like flipping through and like modifying presets can get you some really good sounds, but you're going to feel creatively stuck at some point, right? So instead of diving into a new thing, which is all too easy to fall into as a trap, and I fall into all the time, getting to know that one thing like all the way to the end of it usually results in better material.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you there. I've definitely fallen right into that trap that you're talking about of having like a bunch of tools and knowing each of them a little bit, you know, whereas I kind of look around, you know, my room and around my VST folder and I'm like, man, like if I just spent like a bunch of time on one of these, I'm sure I would be able to get 200, 300% better sounds out of it than being like, oh, just let me grab this one once a month and let me mess with that tool twice a month. And, you know, yeah, I guess I learned a little bit about it. But if I just spent a month and like, nope, every single thing I make is using this new VST I just got. I'm going to read the manual. I'm going to make sure that I know what all the knobs do. I'm going to practice designing sounds in it. I'm going to save these patches. I'm going to do mud pies with it, see what all the knobs do, see, you know, really. And then you get to know, like, you know, it's kind of like how Dylan, when he does his like timer beat palettes, he'll like make the palette initially, rock with it, be like, oh, you know what? I did these 3 things in here to help myself out. Save as new palette version 2. Next time, make the beat in that palette. Ooh, yeah, I added this rack to the master and I added this instrument. I'm definitely keeping this new drum rack. Okay, cool. That's version 3. And each time you get better and faster and you know exactly what you're doing in there. Same with like using the same VST over and over, like whatever it is, you know exactly, oh, when I map this LFO to that and then modulate it by this, I get this crazy type of sound, and then just put a different wavetable in that and you get a whole new, you know, texture of sound that's doing that extremely useful type of wobble.
Yeah. Well, remember when Snails like came up with his sound and it was some like specific reason thing and he just like made a whole bunch of variations and called it Vomit Step and like just built like a whole universe around like slime and puke and snails and that sound.
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is, like, that is exactly speaking to that point of like, he knew, it sounds like you said he made that type of stuff in Reason.
Yeah.
There's probably I don't know, Luke, you chime in here, but there's probably a synth in Reason that is like the best complex oscillator type.
There's one literally called Complex One. I have no idea how to use it yet.
Look at that. You should
Maybe
probably learn
the manual.
Like
yeah, maybe if you want
by itself. I don't know, man. It's just bizarre.
If you want to make Vomit Step, you need to read the manual, because
I typed Vomit Step into the PDF.
many people have Reason, including your boy Luke over here, but probably much like Luke, never the Complex One thing that you're talking about, the synth. There's probably a vast majority, 95% of people that use Reason that don't have that thing dialed all the way in. And Snails, you know, took the time to learn that thing, to find some settings in that provided something that he found unique, and built a whole career off of that. Like, let's think about that for a second. Taking that thing all the way to its extent of knowing it inside and out and finding this one type of processing that makes this weird vomit type thing, literally made that, I could literally created a sound that he rode all the way to the top of the upper echelons of the dubstep field. Like that is all you need, is to have enough of a differentiator to be able to create something that you could label a sound. And then if it's cool enough and people hop on board, like that could be your thing. But I think those things only really happen in the depths of that VST or that synth or whatever that thing is that you're using, because most other people have probably gone through the 20-30% of the other stuff.
Yeah. People, that's the issue. It's not. Bunny said he's been going down rabbit holes that aren't mine. Good one, Bunny. But the problem isn't going down rabbit holes. It's about going down too many rabbit holes only a little way and not figuring out where any of them come out. Follow the rabbit hole to the end. Keep going down this rabbit hole. Be intentional about it. Set aside time. Put it on your schedule. Like Google Calendar is definitely your friend.
Yeah. But like the thing is though, like you need, like, also I think one thing that Bunny said was you don't spend a lot of time.
That's
fart step. Yeah,
just today.
Yeah, killing it. Just slanging it. I don't spend very much time sound designing and lots of time songwriting, writing melodies. Like if that's what excites you, like follow that passion though. Double down on your strengths. If you found yourself to be really good at writing melodies, that rabbit hole is much more fun following melodies to the end, right? Like if sound design doesn't really like grab you or strike your fancy, like you don't need to necessarily force that, because it's not like the thing that excites you the most, the thing that you're the best at, the thing that like you sit down and you're like, yes, like I want to write this type of melody in F Phrygian, and it's gonna sound like Pirates of the Caribbean on acid or whatever the fuck. Like it doesn't matter. But if you're
like a whole festival stage,
that sounds like a whole thing. That's acid pirates. Who's making that music? I'm ready for it. Someone make a whole career out of that, please. But
coat the pirates, Morty.
all of that to say, like, follow what excites you, and it doesn't necessarily need to be the thing that like other people are doing. Like whatever excites you, follow that rabbit hole. Like I sat down yesterday at like 8:30. I was like, I got like, I'm a little tired, but I'm gonna make some sort of resound. I was up until 2 a.m. working on sound design, post-processing bullshit. Well, maybe not bullshit because it's all beneficial, right? But that being said, like I was enjoying myself following that rabbit hole long enough that I literally spent 5 hours just doing sound design because I was having fun. And so like take that strength, take that thing that you're passionate about and follow that rabbit hole. It doesn't need to be sound design. It could be writing melodies. It could be making drum beats. It could be designing hardstyle kicks, whatever the hell it is. Like channel that and take it all the way to the end, because that's going to provide the most fruit from the tree of that thing.
From the tree of acid pirates.
So big up chat.
Yo, chat's asking how to quit smoking weed. I'm curious if you guys have noticed any bad habits creep into your life or anything that you've tried to fix over quarantine and how you've gotten yourself out of that rut.
Well, right at the beginning of quarantine, I smoked a very large bowl, which happened to me my very last bowl of weed in the house. And I like really burnt my throat on that one. And, then my super, super high ass started going down this little rabbit hole of thinking, okay, so it's a pandemic of a respiratory illness that's killing people worldwide, and I am intentionally burning the back of my throat off. this seems silly. Maybe I just won't leave the house to buy more weed today and see what happens. And I cracked a pretty hefty weed habit. I was smoking all day, every day. And since the pandemic started, like the rest of last year, it was occasional chronic smoking. And this year, since I was down to barely at all, I just said, you know what, this first 3 months with the Remix Your Life, no weed smoking. And, you know, it wasn't like a big, tough goal, but it was like a nice little, let me just put a bow on that for now kind of goal. But I noticed that in that time, when I would smoke weed, I would stay at the computer noodling around on stuff. I wasn't necessarily as productive as I could be late at night high, but it would wake me back up, smoke a little sativa, wake back up, keep noodling around. But when I stopped, I would get a little tired, and I was like, oh yeah, well, I'm a little tired, but I don't think I'm going to fall asleep yet. Let me just pop over to the couch and put on an episode of something on Netflix. And I started late night binging TV shows. Like, oh man, what happens in the next 4 episodes of Star Trek Voyager though? Like, like it's going anywhere, you know? And so that was one of the bad habits I did definitely pick up during quarantine, was doing more Netflix binges, because before quarantine I wasn't at home as much. You know, when I'm out on the road for a week, I'm basically watching no TV at all, you know, and then the other 3 weeks I'm doing more work to try and save money for the trip, and then I'm trying to, you know, work in that time to stay in the studio to still be productive on music. And then all of a sudden I just had more time, and it was easier to get more Netflix in. So broke that. I still watch some Netflix and stuff, but I stopped that late night binge part. Like, at least in the daytime or in the evening, it's like, all right, well, cool. I watched one show while I'm trying to eat, and then I'm back to the studio to finish working on that song I'm still excited about and have energy for. Whereas like when you start watching Netflix at 3 a.m., this is just a bad recipe. And then another one was, another bad habit I picked up was just not moving, not working out enough. Like during, you know, normal real life, when the world was open, I would go to the yoga studio. We have a sweet yoga studio right down the street that had classes every night, and I could, you know, go get a little stretch on for an hour, work out, sweat a little bit, come home, hit the shower, and be energized for my night of making music. But then, of course, that spot shut down immediately when COVID hit, and it got really easy to just not do any intentional movement at all during the day, most days. So another stick goal for Remix Your Life was to do at least one workout on this exercise app called Fit On every day. So even if it's like an 8-minute stretching routine at 4:30 in the morning before I go to sleep, like at least I got up out of the computer chair at the end of the night and like did some up dogs and down dogs. So, you know, my back doesn't hurt when I wake up. Like, you know, and some days, you know, it's like I'll do a couple of them and I'll sweat a bunch. More often I'll do like a couple of chill stretches late at night. But either way, it's like something to not completely fall apart as a functioning physical human being.
And pro tip for any producers out there, which should be all of you, if you're ever finding yourself sitting in front of a loading bar, say you're freezing a whole group of basses or something like that, or you're exporting a song and moving on to another one, whatever it is, if there's a loading bar filling up at some point, stand up, stretch for the entire duration of that loading bar, and then sit back down. Maybe it's 30 seconds, maybe it's 4 minutes, maybe it's 5 seconds, but all of that is going to feel much better than just checking Instagram for those 4 minutes or whatever else you might find to fill your time, daydreaming or whatever. And it also like helps just like mentally like distinguish into like new frames of thought and stuff. Like standing up and stretching, as simple as it sounds, will make you more able to make good music. So yeah, one thing that I've found beneficial, I mean, I'm still my stretching and workout goals, especially after getting injured in September, like I've been much higher than I've been able to do since getting back to a sense of normalcy in my life. But all of that being said, like that's one little thing that you can do that I've found like consistently is an easy way to break through that a little bit. Or if you're watching a tutorial or anything that you're trying to learn, like stretch while you're watching it and then recreate it in your DAW after you watch the whatever it was that you're trying to learn. I frequently will still just like watch little tidbits of like, you know, sound design tricks or whatever it is. But like what I've found is that if you don't recreate it yourself after you watch it, you don't retain that material. And when you're watching it, you could just be sitting there vegging, or you could sit down on the ground, do some stretching while you watch it, and then recreate it. And that is the most powerful combo for that type of thing that I've found. Or maybe while you're watching this podcast, get up out of your chair, stand up, stretch your hammies, maybe sit down on the ground for the rest of this podcast and just do some stretches. It's all good for you.
Yeah,
it's
and
nice.
Stretch up to that keyboard and drop some more in the chat because we're enjoying this part of the show. Just a little stretch up there. But yeah, let's hit back to the chat.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's one thing I noticed too. Like, you know, quarantine has definitely taught me to take care of your body and mind. You know, I know everybody's saying that now, and you know, I just want to echo that statement because I think it's definitely important. You know, like I think those little like micro pains and stuff that you carry throughout the day, if you're sitting in a bad posture, you're not, you know, stretching, taking care of yourself, like all of that is depleting your energy throughout the day. It's depleting, you know, your mood, how you're feeling. It's like having a leaky gas tank in your car, right? But it's just not recognized the same. And Luke, you brought up a point.
But
sorry?
Not quite as flammable.
Right.
Dangerous to your overall productivity.
But you did mention a point on not binging, and I noticed, you know, definitely it's easier for me to continue with the habit once it's started. It's just like it's the reversal of the habit that like both of the sides are slippery slopes, right? And if you're on the right track, you'll continue to be on the right track. Some things I think is just easier to say no to completely for periods of time rather than to play the whole rationalization game and be like, oh, I will sometimes, or I'm going to moderate this thing. Like, you know, if I have a lot of free time, I'm going to waste, you know, quite a bit of it, and I'm going to smoke a bit of weed and whatever. And if I don't want to do that, the first thing that I have to take serious is like not staying up too late, getting proper sleep, doing all of these things like stretching that keep me feeling good so that there's not that like micro stuff in the back of my mind, like wearing me down and making me pleasure seek in stuff that, you know, isn't as important, like sweets and bad food or weed or whatever that is for you, right? Like, I don't know. I just found, you know, when I would be like, oh, I'm going to stop smoking for a bit, or I'm going to stop, you know, eating sweets, like I would find myself in this like mental gymnastics loop of like, oh, well, like, since I'm starting tomorrow, you know, like I might as well just like tack on one more day here and then I'll start the streak tomorrow. And it's like, I'm always thinking about the streak. And I've just noticed like, I think what you said, Luke, was like something that works really well for me is like set a date, just be like, I'm going to put this away for a bit and then get past that first day. And then now you have a 1-day streak and just keep the streak going. That's what helps me a lot.
Yeah, that reminds me of that Jerry Seinfeld story where he just decided at one point to have his calendar pinned to his wall, and just every single day that he wrote comedy, you know, practice writing, he would write a big red X on that day. And then eventually you've got a streak of days. And then you look at that calendar, you're like, well, I'm not about to break the streak today. Fuck that. I'm just going to at least, okay, yeah, I'm tired, whatever, but let me write so I can put an X. I don't want to break that. I don't want to look back at this month and have that one stupid blank white day.
Exactly.
Love that. And, that's why anybody who follows my Instagram at What Would Trap Jesus Do? What's up, y'all? One of my many Instagrams, good God. Also follow us at The Human Music Podcast, and follow me at Luke Rain Music, and of course at Rave Gravy, and then throw in at Bounce Gang with a V. Moving on. If you follow my Trap Jesus Instagram, you'll notice that, once a month I'll drop a picture of a full calendar, full calendar month. And, that's a lot of people think that's like me scheduling myself out of all the things I have to do that day. But no, that's what Google Calendar is for. It's 2021. Come on, people. That calendar is at the end of the day. I wrote down what I am glad I accomplished that day, what I'm glad I did. Anytime I record the podcast here, I write that down on the calendar. If I went to work and made some money, I'll write that down on the calendar. If I started a new song or finished a new draft of a song I'm working on, if I had, lessons with my students, if I had a call with one of my collaborators, like any of that I am glad I did. I decided to do something. I actually did it. I'll write that on the calendar. And that was kind of, swinging back to the beginning of the podcast, like a way to combat that sameness of every day blending together and losing my inspiration. And so I found myself the first week of the quarantine being like, the fuck did I do today? I know I did something, but it just feels like I'm just still sitting at home all day. Weird. This is bizarre. I'm used to going to work and then coming home and then doing this and then that and having this progression of my day where now I'm just here for 6 straight weeks, not doing nothing else. And so having that thing that I had to do at the end of the day gave me a little extra piece of routine, and I could look back at the month and being like, oh yeah, wow, look at this. Every single day I did something I'm glad I accomplished. And it really helped me, differentiate the days, even though I'm doing something the same every day. But every day I have to sit at the end of the day and think back over the day, what did I accomplish today? My favorite ones are the days where I'm writing really little to try and fit it all in the calendar. And then I'll start writing in my journal after that and realize I left out a few things that I did. Oh, I did that too. Oh shit, that wouldn't even fit on the calendar. Those are my favorite days. I'm wow, man, look at all this stuff I did today.
Yeah, I love that. Nice. Because almost always I look back on my day and stress out about the things that I thought I was going to do that I didn't get to. And sometimes it's not that I didn't do productive things. It's just I didn't do the things that I said I was going to, in my own head or on my calendar that I scheduled for myself. I didn't get to them, right? And then I'm like, God, I didn't do that today. What an idiot. But maybe I spent the 2 hours I was supposed to do that thing, continuing to noodle on the guitar because I had a really cool riff that I was enjoying and I wanted to record, and then that riff led to a chorus, and that chorus led to a verse, and then some lyrics, and maybe I spent that 2 hours making myself a song starter, and I wasn't necessarily supposed to do that, but maybe that will be more beneficial in the end than the thing that I thought was more important, because at the time I prioritized that over the thing I said I was going to do. But at the end of the day, I'm still God, I didn't do that thing. What a failure. And I think instead of focusing on the negative energy there, focusing on the things that you did get done that are beneficial. And then also writing them down helps you remember, oh yeah, I made that really cool song starter. I should use that this Saturday when I have a writing day or whatever. Using the things that you did do to help leverage more things that you can accomplish is more beneficial than thinking about the stuff you didn't do. I might have to steal that from you. I might start doing that.
Man, please, anybody feel free. I am not going to trademark or patent that. I don't know if y'all ever gave $20 to the Wilderness Society one time and they just send you calendars in the mail forever. I don't know how the Wilderness Society feels okay about mailing that much paper, being that they're the Wilderness Society, but free calendar with cool pictures. But yeah, please find something to do with those calendars other than throw them in a landfill.
old analog calendars.
Oh yeah. There, the Google Calendar is way better for figuring out what I have to do later because it's with me in my pocket or on my computer anywhere I go. It sends me a little reminder. I can, if somebody wants to remind me to do something, they can hook it to my email, which hooks it to my calendar. And then anywhere I am in the world, I can remember I'm supposed to be on this Zoom call. By anywhere in the world, I mean here or maybe at my girlfriend's house. But yeah, like that's way better for like scheduling shit in the 21st century. But man, those old calendars, like actually physically with your hand writing something down, and I have it like hanging on the wall of my bedroom. So it's like, I have to walk past this calendar to get to bed. It's like right inside the doorway. So I stop and I write on that, and then I shut out the lights and go over to the bed. It's like,
Yeah.
All right, cool. I filled up my square.
Do you guys feel like in quarantine, because there's like, you feel like you have more time not having to commute if you're working from home or whatever, but you feel like you have more time than you did because generally you're out doing things less, right? And so you start scheduling these things on your calendar, and then your calendar, at least for me, I'm wondering if you or Big Up Chat has any comments on this, but do you feel like your calendar, because you start adding more to it, becomes less important for the specific items? Because like your day is never, at least for me, your day is never just like 9 to 10 a.m. Send these emails, 10 to 11, write this song starter for my writing day on Saturday, 11 to 12. Do this thing, 1 to 2, finish this, 2 to 4, finish this thing. Like it never is just like, yeah, that perfect chunk of time that I got this thing done in that perfect chunk of time, and I didn't go over it all. Like that literally never happens to me. So then like the calendar, which is basically just a reminder list at this point, becomes like a things I need to do, but none of it. Things like this podcast, I don't miss. But the other things that I wrote for myself, like they don't always get done. Like at least I found for me in quarantine, that calendar, at least the Google Calendar, the one on your phone that changes all the time, that you can just move the little block to the next day, it doesn't mean as much. It's not like I have to do it.
I feel you, man. The Google Calendar definitely works best for me when it's things I have to do with other people on a specific schedule. Like, thank God all of my producer lessons are there. All the dojo sessions are on the Google Calendar, and they give me that alert. It's like, all right, I have 30 minutes until I have to be ready on Zoom to teach. Awesome. Hey, the podcast is always there, so nobody can schedule a lesson during the podcast. Sorry, I'm not on Dojo TV. I can't help you right now.
Yeah.
All those kind of things, team meetings, webinars that I want to attend, all that stuff that's like really time sensitive goes on there. And then nothing else can take that period of time. But then, I feel you. What works, kind of what works for me is going analog again by having this little notebook right next to me here that I can just, have my priority to-do list. Like, these are the things I got to get done. At some point, I have to watch that tutorial. I have to edit that episode of the podcast. I have to do second draft of that song I started. I have to get into track feedback. I have, so I know over the next few days, I've got to check all these things off the list. And then in the in-between times, when I'm like, all right, cool, I finished that lesson. I'm not hungry yet. Glance at the list. Oh, I can do feedback right now. Nice. And I'll take that off the list, and then I'll write it right back on the list so I remember to do it again.
I feel like,
oh, hey, I've got a couple of hours. This would be a really good time to dive into doing draft 2 of that song. And then I can definitely get that done before that lesson coming up or whatever.
I've come and go on the written checklist for what I need to do that day, but having this conversation with you guys has already sparked the aha of when it's on the Google Calendar, you can't put a red X through it. And that X is like this weird dopamine release in your brain of like, yeah, that's done.
I mean, it
And then it's like
dims
momentum.
color.
Yeah, and I mean, you can make it a task that you can check, but then it's not I've tried this. You can make it a task instead of an event, and you can check it off, but then there's no reminder.
Mhm.
And that reminder is more important than the thing being on your cap. You need the thing that pops up and says, "Do this thing, you idiot," or you're not gonna. I don't remember to do it. I'm doing this. I was doing sound design for the last 4 hours. You can't expect me to remember to do this other thing when this respace is so sick. Like, it sounds so stupid, but that's the way my idiot monkey brain works. Like, if I'm having fun doing this thing, like, nah, it's not really that important. I'll do it tomorrow. But when it's on your physical thing in front of you, like staring at you in the face, you could be like, yeah, I did that. Cross it off. What's next? Yeah, I'll do that. Cross it off. And you're like, I'm making progress. I'm making headway. I got momentum here. I'm going to go through the rest of this list. It's different. It is different.
Honesty time. How many of us, and big up chat, chime in, have ever written down the thing on your to-do list right after you completed it just so you could strike it through on the list?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All the time. Like, I did that shit.
I mean, one, I think it's good keeping a mental note. And two, I think the reason streaks and routines and that kind of stuff are so important is because that consistency builds confidence and I feel actually changes you as a person, in the sense that you start to identify with somebody that's actively getting this shit done and really cares about this shit and can't wait to do this shit again. And this is just part of your lifestyle and that's just who you are. And when you're at that point, then it's easy to do the things you're supposed to do and to leave behind the things that you don't want to do. But I think it's, a lot of, it's like kind of a mental thing as well.
Yeah. Ether shift. We need a phonetics expert here. We need a layman's explanation of
phonetics expert. I think we need a phonetics expert, which is why you need a phonetics expert.
You got me on that one. God dang. We need a phonetics expert, and I need some grammar police.
Etymologist and an entomologist.
I need grammar police.
Etymologist knows the difference.
Wait, the grammar police are already here. Never mind. He says, however you say his name, it looks cool though. I only swipe my Google Calendar notification away when I do the thing. Then I get that sweet dopamine. That's actually brilliant.
Dopamine.
Because you can leave that thing there. It's really annoying. I actually just swipe it away instantly because I'm like, shoo fly, don't bother me. I'm playing guitar riffs.
Doing something I'm not supposed to be doing right now.
F off. I really like that though, because that swipe is that's done.
Motion.
Yeah. So, but then it's like
to the left.
I think you swipe the note. At least my Google Calendar notifications top right, so you got to go right.
To the right.
It doesn't have the same ring to it, but
Fun.
I had to double check
note about that song. The writer of that song was actually Neo. Everything you own in a box to the left. Don't ever get to thinking you're irreplaceable. I could have another you in a minute. And he wrote that song. Was like, yeah, this is dope. And then he kind of listened back to himself and was like, oh, my female fan base is going to hate me for singing this song. It sounds so misogynistic. I should give this to a woman. And then Beyonce sang it, and then it's a total girl power anthem.
But isn't that like misogynistic to even fucking think that? That's kind of funny, but like, and it is a good anecdotal story. But isn't that a little backwards too? I mean, I don't know. That's kind of funny though.
Power dynamics are an interesting thing, but you can definitely like write a good song and look at the optics of the situation and be like, my artist persona should not sing this. It's not going to be on brand for me.
Yeah, fair enough. At least Neo.
Brown song, on the other hand, right on brand.
Yeah. At least Neo has his manager or whatever to call up and be like, send this to all the best pop stars in the world. This is a banger. That being said, there actually is a lesson to take from that for all of us in quarantine. Like, if you write a song, or not a full song, but like a good idea, and you know that there's something solid in there, but maybe you've listened to it too many times, or you wrote the best 3 parts and you're like, God, everything I'm writing after this doesn't really hold up. Find some producer homies, find someone that's on a similar level to you, find someone that you can cohabitate with and make a better final product, and send it to Collab Bro, SoundCloud message them, anything. Like, you can
Not
use
anything.
all of those like ideas that you come up with that you're like, is this good? Well, you probably don't want to send something that's just average to someone, but if you know that there's something great in there, but you can't extract the full greatness, much like the late great misogynist Neo, send it to someone that can really make that thing shine. And I think that that's an important skill to recognize when you're a producer. It's like, you're not always going to be the one guy that makes this incredible hit factory amount of tracks, and everyone is a golden egg laid in your roost. Great analogy there. You need to be able to use your friends and your producer homies and like actually take those ideas that you might not be able to take to the finish line because of, burnout or whatever, and be able to get something out of them and extract that greatness that is there, but you don't want to sit on your hard drive forever.
Yeah, amen. My most recent tune, Storm Drain, with Chauncey, I had a burst of inspiration one day and laid down an a cappella vocal and forgot about it for 4 whole years until Chauncey was like, bro, do you got any vocals that I could use for a collab? Let me check. It turns out this is actually pretty good. Let me do a light tuning to it and send it over to you.
Yeah, dude, that vocal is fire. That whole song is fire, by the way. Actually, that when you sent me that, I was like, this is the best shit I've heard out of that corner in a while. Like, that is a good ass. Big up, chat. If y'all haven't heard Storm Drain by the boys Luke Rain and Chauncey, go stream that thing on Spotify, add it to a playlist, hit that dang heart button. All of the things. It's a great tune. It's a great tune.
Thank you. We're well past 2,000 plays. I'm pumped about that.
Yeah, let's go.
Luke Rain's Spotify re-up where I deleted everything and started over with bass music instead of rap music. That's the first time I broke 2,000 plays, so I'm pumped about that. I'll make sure to drop that link in the chat. Yeah. But yeah, that just goes to show though, like if you think this is a cool idea, reach out to somebody. They will do something to it that you never would have thought of. I never would have gone this direction with this song by myself.
That's
in fact, there's a reason I'm sitting as an acapella for 4 years. I had no idea what to produce under that at the time, and just then forgot about it.
Unless the thumbnail is incorrect, I believe you might have sent Spice It Up.
Well, listen to that one too. It's also
listen to that one for sure.
That's interesting. Turns out they're reverse chronological order on my link tree.
STSP, very, very easily misclicked.
Yep. All right. Listen to my songs, y'all. Shameless promo.
Yeah. Plug it up.
Big up, chat. Let's get back to the chat and see what they're talking about over here.
Y'all got any questions, things you've been struggling with in quarantine production life that you might need some?
Chef Womp here is saying he's got a hard time working on songs for an extended period of time, like 3 days, and he needs to move on. Give the people a realistic, like, insight, behind the scenes look into some of the tracks that you released, maybe a notable track or two. How long has that been in the making? How much refining did that take? How long was that sitting versus actively being worked on?
Ooh.
I mean, shit, I can start. Like,
the
Something Wrong EP I did was like 1.5 years of working on it, and maybe I would say most of the working on it was tipped towards like the first half of working on the project, whereas the latter half was a lot of sitting on it and coming back with fresh ears and working on stuff. I'd say it varies on the idea. It varies depending on the idea, because I've definitely had, old ideas from a year or two ago that are now getting refined and put out soon. I think one of the tracks I'm working on recently that's been kind of in the shortest time span was a idea I started 2 months ago, worked on for a week, left it for a month and a half, and picked it up again this week. So it's like just at that 2-month mark. And in that time, like, I don't think I would have came up with the main hook section and done the production the way I did if I just rushed to release it that week. But I think, there's a lot of value in like stockpiling these ideas and sitting on them. And then when you're in a sort of different mindset or different phase of your production journey, you can like come back and add that new dimension that complements what you had earlier. So I don't know. I think like something like what Chef Wamp is saying is pretty normal overall. I know it can seem like a lot of these artists are finishing tunes left and right, which it definitely is a skill you can get better at and should be working towards. But like the stuff you're making now might be the foundation for the bulk of what you release next year or the year after. And the artists that are releasing a shit ton this year probably have a bulk of that from a year or two ago.
Yeah.
How do you guys
Spiderhand talks about is having that, that stack of tracks that are all technically ready to go before you start releasing something, like having at least 6 tracks if you're going to do one a month. And then, you might end up knocking some of those tracks off the list or knocking them down the list or redoing them 3 times before you actually drop them. But, at least you knew they were real close.
Yeah. Honestly, for me, this is because I used to do the same thing. I used to end up spending 3, 4 days, 5 days trying to write the content of a song. And what I found, at least for me, is I have a really hard time coming back to the genesis of that idea and being able to coherently add parts to that idea that make sense. So what I found is that I need one writing session that gets all of the meat of the song out. And then that might sit for a week. It might sit for a month. It might sit for 6 months. It might sit for a year. But if you had the meat, the core of that idea done in that session, the cream will rise to the top. You'll come back to that later and you'll be like, you know what? This actually there's a lot of strength here and this needs to come out. And now, having stepped away from it for a bit, like, I think this, and this needs to be improved. But having that starting place, that foundation, that whole complete idea allows you to not need to go back and rewrite in a significant way a bunch of stuff. Maybe you're like, this section still feels a little blank. It needs an ARP in the background. That's not hard. If you're like, the melodic structure isn't captivating, like, that means you need to write a new song, in my case, right? So for me, being able to get that whole idea out and then like maybe bounce a copy of that full idea and leave it on my Dropbox, and like periodically I'll go back and be like, what do I need to finish? What is still just okay in the crop of songs that I have? And like I said, yeah, the cream always rises to the top, but having that full idea out in that first session, make sure that you're not going back and tweaking that bass line to see if you can pump an extra 5-10% of interest out of that thing. Like, that's not necessarily going to make it from good to great. What I found is that normally a great song starts in the first idea that you put into the computer. And then you can make that great idea an amazing song, or that great idea will remain just, great or good or whatever. But you need that full thing, for me at least, because I have trouble coming back to it and rewriting stuff. And that'll end up being the one that balloons into like 3, 5, 7, 10 days of me trying to write this thing, thinking there's something there that if I'm just doing 2-3 hours, 1 hour at a time, it just never really ends up the same. And I waste a lot of time trying to like get there, you know?
100%.
So do you how often do you have an idea zero, or is that never for you? Like, do you ever have something that jumpstarts the process that you don't keep in the final, or do you not move on until you have a solid first idea?
No, that's a really good question. It happened. The idea zero has to be the thing that grabs you, though. That spark has to be the thing that you're like, yes, this song is getting built around. Like the initial spark that I thought I was going to work with and started building stuff around, like maybe I might get like 4 or 5 parts deep into that thing and then go, you know what? I actually don't think the initial idea was good enough to start with. Whole new thing. And that's okay. But you have to get to a point where that one thing that you're going to build a song around ends up being captivating enough that it's worth taking the many, 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 many hours to finish a song and take it to completion. So yeah, it happens a few different ways, but that initial, like those chords or that bass line or that groove or that sound that you made, whatever it is that's the spark, has to be the thing that is worth taking all of that time to then turn it into a whole song.
100% agree.
Yeah, so that it's got to have that. I mean, to me, like there's a difference. You know, shouts out to Ilgate, just popped in the chats, and one of
what's good?
I learned from this, and the reason we're all here is the difference between, you know, like having a spark and a face. Like the spark to me is like whatever got my juices going, like, oh, here's a cool chord pattern. And then, you know, you might build some drums off of that and a bass line, and then you get a lyric, and then you like listen to the lyric and the melody of the lyric, and you listen back with those chords and be like, fuck those chords. I don't need those chords. They got me in the door. They got my juices running. They kickstarted the motor, but they don't necessarily need to be the thing that is the key. Like if you get a bunch of cool pieces and you need to mute some of the early ones, that's cool too. But definitely agree with you, Evan. Like if I don't get the entire main chunk of the idea out, like the main structure of the actual song part out in that first session, I basically abandon that session at this point. Like I've learned that trying to go back to the same session to get a song out of it day after day just doesn't really work. You know, it's so much better to use one of the awesome tools we have in the dojo, like using an arrangement exercise where it's like, man, like this is a roadmap to a really good structure, you know, or, like using any one of the awesome EDM cookbook recipes, which are all great roadmaps to a structure, you know, putting that in a timer format if you want to speed yourself up. Like all those things can help you, and practicing them can help you get ideas all the way to first draft status. If I can't get that first draft status in one session, usually that song withers on the vine.
Which also goes just back to the importance of, like we were talking about, when in quarantine, there's lots of ideas, but you don't feel like all of them are real winners. It goes back to like, instead of spending that 2 hours at the beginning of your writing day trying to come up with the idea that's going to be the one, and maybe you started with something that you thought was going to be the face that ended up kind of withering away in your mind is the main thing. Like having that starting place that you know is worth making a whole song out of before you even sit down to write the song is just like critically important, because that's going to make it 100 times more possible that you're able to get that full draft of the song out in one session, which, like we talked about, is like the key to not having that ballooning work structure of like, I think there's a song here, I just got to put a couple more hours in today and a couple more hours. Like that doesn't work. So having those preparatory ideas, those song starters before you sit down for that writing day, especially if you're feeling a little bit uninspired that day, is just absolutely critical.
Yeah, I think it would help a lot of people too, not only for the focus aspect of creating those song starters, like just having a solidified vision for that session, but also just the fact that since it's the only thing you're focused on, like you can really make sure it's loopable, and every time it comes back to that first downbeat, it feels right, and the bass line is moving in a way that makes sense, and the harmony has some sort of direction that makes sense. Meaning Like, what are your chords doing? Hopefully one isn't up here and one is down here and one is here and the other is down here, and it's like zigzagging up and down. Hopefully there's some sort of smooth movement between these parts. And, you know, like, maybe that's not all stuff that comes to you instinctually in the moment when your mindset is tuned into must write song, must finish song today. But if you just make it a goal to like get entranced in this melody and just keep it on loop while you know, work on it and like really fill it out and mess around with a lot of like depth and all of that stuff, like, now when you start the session, you're starting off with something that's very foundationally sound, and all of these parts are going to work amazingly for a subtractive type of arrangement. And then obviously you can build on top of that too, but it's just like, if you have those elements, like the bass chords lead, let's say, for a melody, and they loop together perfectly, and you start building around that, now it's like you're really going to have to try hard to make this tune trash if the melody is good and loopable.
Yeah, I think that's really important, is that like if you start with something great, it's like much easier to add supporting characters to that great thing to finish the song to be great. If you start with something good, it's hard to get like an alternate character, that supporting role that like steals the show and like makes the song great all of a sudden. Like if it really was that great, you should have just scrapped the other stuff and like made that thing the main thing, right?
That white noise riser though. Whoo!
Sick. Yeah, that white noise riser is the reason I listen to your song for sure.
Every time. A repeat.
Yeah.
Any other final burning questions from the chat for us to tackle?
Big up, chat. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Always fun. But yeah.
Oh,
anything
yeah. Tommy says that kind of rotating through a group of tracks things we mentioned a couple episodes ago.
Yeah.
Here's turning on a better way to approach music.
Hell yeah.
Instead of noodling on an idea for weeks or a month before moving on. Yeah, 100%. That's something I used to get really stuck in, was like really focusing, coming back day after day to try and push one turd of a track forward, as opposed to learning how to spend a whole long period of a day, like all Saturday, just banging out a track, getting that big nugget, and then like putting that in rotation with a few songs I'm currently working on and going through them to, you know, to get around, you know, to get around back to the tracks. And what I love about that is you learn something on one track that then helps you on all these other tracks. And you're not like just grinding one into the dust.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I learned early on to not be well, I didn't know early on when I was doing it, but when I was a beginner, I spent the first 3 months after learning how to get sound out of Massive and make a basic drum beat, spent 3 months making one garbage track. And that's literally coming home from work and working on it every night. Embarrassing, not to mention a waste of time.
It's all part of the process, though.
It is, though. It is. But it's definitely something that you learn to be just not efficient in your process, right? Like you being able to rotate and work on tracks with fresh ears. When you listen to something for the first time after not hearing it for a week, like the things that stick out are a more accurate description of the things you need to fix rather than the thing you were just working on that you then hear and want to tweak that little thing that doesn't really matter, but because you were just working on it, it's at the front of your brain. You're instinctually gonna go to that thing and start screwing with it again for maybe 5 minutes, maybe 15, maybe an hour. That's probably not the best use of your time, but if you let it sit, come back to it with fresh ears, the things that stick out are actually the things you need to fix. And so you can leverage that to actually finish more music. I think it was like Chris Lorenzo in some article that I was reading like 4 or 5 years ago, but he said that when he was finishing like these songs for his album, he would work on a song 15 minutes at a time. He would have like 8 songs and he would open up a song and work on it for 15 minutes at a time because his ears were so burnt on these tracks. He would make some small tweaks, close that project, work on the next one, small tweaks, and move on to the next one. But like
Really shaving those mixes.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, sometimes that's what it takes. And after listening to 7 other tracks, coming back to that one, maybe even 3 or 4 hours later, is going to sound much different, much more unique. You have the problems of the 7 previous tracks in your head, and that first one, you're going to be able to listen to much more objectively and be able to finish your stuff up. So,
yeah, and especially it's a really good way to see which ones are like head and shoulders better than the rest, and knees and toes way lower than the rest, I guess.
Yeah,
standing
actually,
in the hole, getting pooped on. Because like some of these tracks you get so excited about in the moment, you might think it's really dope, but you go listen to other music that you've made or that somebody else made, and you might realize like, oh yeah, no, never mind, not that one. That one's not the one I thought it was. And that's a very valuable piece of information to have. If you only show up in the exact same session, only listen to one set of sounds over and over every single day, how do you know? It's hard to have objectivity. So get out, do something else. Listen to somebody else's tunes, professional tunes. Listen to other amateur tunes. Like figure out. Listen to your other tunes. Figure out where your new song stacks up. I've been so gassed on songs like, oh, this is amazing, and then come back to it a week later and just chuckled at myself like, no, it's not.
And I think that's actually a good place to wrap up, unless the chat has any other burning questions, because that reminded me of the place that I wanted to start, which is the biggest thing that I've found to be beneficial during quarantine when your process is very routine, is breaking out of that in any way that you can. Going to take a walk, leaving that song for a week, doing something just slightly different in your daily routine is how you refresh your brain to approach your creative projects with more vigor and actually be able to give them the attention and the broad stroke creative focus that it takes to make something great, rather than just getting stuck in the ruts that it's so easy to do when you're doing the same thing over and over and over. So whatever you can do to switch up your process, I think that for me, at least, is the biggest takeaway, especially when you're naturally inclined to do the same thing every day. After a year of quarantining, that's kind of the thing that I found to be the overarching concept. So,
amen. So like always, y'all, peace out and peace among worlds.
Oh, you got the shirt, dude. Sick. Peace among worlds, friends. Thank you for hanging out with us. Big up, chat.
Big up,
chat.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
All right, y'all.
Until next time.
Stay safe out there.
Peace
among worlds. I like it.
Wow, what an episode, humans. Appreciate y'all for being here with us. Big up chat over at the Dojo TV for being there with us for questions. You can get in on that chat on the next episode we do over there every other Tuesday if you just click that little link below. Remember our other sponsors, the Dojo Max membership, where you can get monthly private lessons, unlimited track feedback, and Ilgate's weekly download archive. That's like 220 episodes and counting of awesome knowledge that you need to level up your producer career. Guest practices. First class is free. You learn from the man, the myth, the legend, Seth Drake himself. Do it. I've been diving back into the episodes on imaging lately, getting my stereo field and dynamics going, and wow, I'm learning so much. Finally, Gvngaroo Records music distribution, where you can get unlimited uploads for under $10. That's it, y'all. So remember to smash that like, the subscribe, drop a comment, tell us your favorite moment, ask a question, all that good stuff. And follow us around the webs at The Human Music Podcast everywhere except Twitter, where we're at Human Music Pod on account of how long your name can be over there. That said, peace out, y'all, and peace among worlds.